Good evening, everyone. I just wanted to let you know before we start recording this hearing that there are speaker slips in the back, and if you could fill one of those out if you do want to speak, it helps us with our records, just to know who spoke and how to spell your name, that kind of thing. If you want to get on the mailing list, there's also some sign-up sheets for that too. So everything's on the back table. We have a few copies of the executive summary of the document, not very many. If you want to grab one of those, you can. I think that's about it. We'll start in about 5 minutes. We also have a couple of copies of the document up here. If you want to look through those during the meeting, that'd be fine. It's been a while, huh?
Yeah, thanks for adding me to the list. Yeah, it's been a while. Yeah, we've been following these projects for a while.
Sorry. If anyone is intending to fill out a speaker slip, please do so. We're going to get started here in just a few minutes. All right, everybody, thanks for coming tonight. Got a really strong turnout. This is the most folks we've seen for an environmental hearing in this division's history, I think, or at least in the modern age here. It's good to see you all. Thank you. I'll start with doing some introductions here. We've got the ERG planning team, starting with the Energy and Minerals and Compliance Division Deputy Director, John Zorovich. My name is Aaron Briggs. I am the supervising planner, and the project planner is Nancy Minnick here to my right. We are going to start with a brief presentation, give you guys kind of an outline of the project description, discuss the process for review of the EIR. We are going to ask that you limit your comments tonight to the subject matter in the EIR, meaning the project's impacts and potential mitigation measures that might reduce those impacts. And we ask that you save any yay or nay type comments for the Planning Commission, who will be the decision maker for this project. We have, it looks like, about 30 speaker slips, so I would appreciate if you were as efficient with your time as possible. We do have the room until 9 o'clock, but it would be nice if we could all go home before then. And with that, Nancy is going to walk through a brief presentation of the project, and then we'll jump right into public comments.
Thank you. It's very good to see all of you here tonight. I wanted to just add to what Aaron was saying, a little list of your opportunities for public input to this project. As Aaron said, we'd like to stick to the environmental document, adequacies, inadequacies in that document that you would like to see addressed. The draft EIR was released June 4. And tonight is our first workshop, public comment hearing. We're scheduled to have another one July 17 in Santa Barbara at 3 p.m. in the Planning Commission hearing room. And it'll be a repeat of this hearing. It won't be much of anything new other than what the public brings to us in the way of comment. The comment period on this document ends August 3rd, that's a Friday at 5 p.m. So if you can get any comments, you can comment by phone, in person, email, letters, pretty much any way you can figure out to do that. We'll take your comments. And then we're looking to have a Planning Commission hearing sometime in the fall. The ERG project is located in Cat Canyon. And it's within ERG's lease holdings in the Cat Canyon oil field. It is entirely within areas where ERG is currently operating or has facilities. And the reason there's a 3.5-mile pipeline associated with the project. It's a replacement of an existing gas pipeline, and that's the part that goes down south to very close to Los Alamos. So the next two slides show the project area and the locations of proposed project elements. These figures are in the environmental document, which is also posted online at our website. This is the northern portion of the site where the wells would be drilled, and it's really hard to see, but existing well pads are shown in blue on these figures, and the proposed new wells and access roads are shown in pink. The new gas piping is shown in green, in a dark green. Not all of the pipeline will be replaced with the new 8-inch line. And this is the pipeline that would be replaced. It does extend currently north into the where the production facilities are, but that portion won't be replaced. It's the southern portion of the pipeline that would be replaced with a larger pipe. So the basic elements of the proposed project are 233 new steam injection wells, 10 new well pads, 1 new equipment pad, and use of 91 existing pads, 9 of which would be expanded to varying degrees. The project includes 4 new steam generators, interfield piping to connect the facilities to one another, and as I mentioned, the 8-inch replacement natural gas fuel line. The The project is estimated at peak production, if all these wells are drilled and producing at peak, be 10,000 barrels of crude oil per day. The EIR Section 2 provides detail on the project description. So I just wanted to run through a few of the existing production facilities that ERG is currently operating. There are about 314 thermal wells and 185 non-thermal wells, but not all of these are currently operating. Not all are active. There are dehydration facilities where the gas, oil, water are separated, storage tanks for the various components, truck loading rack, and again, the natural gas fuel pipeline. And there are steam generators on site as well. There are currently 3 steam generators, 2 of which are operating for ERG's thermal production. Just wanted to show a little graphic about the cyclic steaming process that would be used for this project and is currently used at the site. The steaming process involves injecting steam into wells for a period of time, allowing the steam to soak into the formation, and after soaking for a few days, the wells opened up and the fluids flow up the well and are transported via the interfield pipelines to the processing facilities. The EIR. The EIR contains a description of the proposed project and the environmental setting, and it provides an identification and assessment of the impacts of the project, potential mitigation measures, alternatives that we looked at for the project, and the cumulative impacts associated with the project. The cumulative development scenario includes 3 oil and gas projects, well, 2 in addition to ERG's, and that's the ERA project and the Petro Rock UCCB project. In addition, there are other projects in the region that we've included on our cumulative projects list, but I think the 3 of most concern are the 3 oil and gas projects. This is just a figure that is in Section 3 of the document that shows where the major oil and gas projects are, the ERG, the ERA project, and Petro Rock. So ERA is to the east of ERG, and Petro Rock is to the west at the northern portion. I'm going to go through a summary of the impacts that we found in the EIR. There were 3 Class 1 impacts. The first 2 are biological resources impacts and hydrology water quality impact associated with an oil spill and the damage that the spill could do or the cleanup of the spill could do. We had a Class 1 noise impact because of the potential for drilling, which needs to occur 24-hour basis until the well is finished and ready. And in this environment, it is very low ambient noise levels. The baseline noise levels are very low, especially at night. And so we found that even with some feasible mitigation that could be applied to dampen that noise or attenuate it or somehow keep it from bothering the sensitive receptors, there are quite a few, it would still, we couldn't guarantee that it would be below our threshold. That's why it's a Class 1 impact. The biology and surface and groundwater impact, Class 1 impacts, are from a rupture or leak that could affect sensitive habitats or sensitive vegetation communities or both, and potentially ground or surface water quality. So the mitigation measure, the primary one for this Class 1 impact is the Emergency Response Action Plan, which is a plan where ERG describes to us how they will respond to a spill if it occurs, and kind of what kind of effort that would take, what kind of actions would be taken, and that way we can assess whether some of those actions would have impact as well. There are several other measures that ERG takes to prevent the spill from happening in the first place, and those are built into their project, one of which is their automated data acquisition system. It's called a SCADA, SCADA, and it provides them with information on the functioning of the project components so that they can see if there's a drop in pressure or some other indication that something's not right, and they would have shutdown capabilities, especially on their pipeline. The other measures they take when they're constructing the project components are safety features that are required to be included. For the construction noise that has the potential to exceed our thresholds, the EIR recommends the adoption of a construction noise control plan, which outlines very specific measures to be taken and where they would be taken, where the equipment or noise dampening features would be located. It also provides for a complaint phone number to be posted and the neighbors made aware of what that number is, so that we can record or at least have a record of noise exceedances. The EIR also found several Class 1 impacts in, I think, most of the issue areas that we looked at. These are the issue areas we looked at, and you can go through the executive summary, provides a good summary of what the impacts are, and then you can go to the section of the document that assesses those to look at the analysis, and what you can find out what you think of that analysis. We found a variety of Class 3 impacts, which are impacts that are adverse but do not require any mitigation because they're well below the thresholds. Excuse me. We also found, we have a discussion in the EIR about no significant impacts. These are issue areas where we did not find any adverse impacts as a result of the project. And this is EIR section 6.5. We also have in section 7 of the document, the Mitigation Monitoring and Reporting Program. This outlines the monitoring and reporting requirements and the responsible parties. So there's a table, couple of tables in section 7 that identify by mitigation measure who's responsible for doing what to ensure that that mitigation measure is implemented properly. The EIR also looks at project alternatives. This is required under CEQA. And to do that, we instituted a screening process. This is described in section 2, I believe, of the document. We discuss alternatives that we considered but did not carry forward for analysis in the document. There were several of those. The no project alternative is required to be looked at, and so, of course, that was carried forward. We had 4 other alternatives that were analyzed in the EIR. The first alternative is a project that includes no new well pads and a reduced well count. So all of the wells that would be on the 7 new well pads would not be constructed and produced under this alternative. The second alternative is similar in that it does not include any new well pads, but it does look at drilling the full well count, 233 wells, as opposed to 187, but all from existing well pads. And alternative 3 is a native habitat production with a reduced well count, native habitat protection, excuse me, with a reduced well count. And that is where ERG has identified areas where they could shrink their footprint and protect more habitat. And the 4th alternative is the native habitat protection alternative, but with the full well count, again, from existing. No, that's not from just existing facilities. It's from the whole project. So we analyzed the alternatives that we carried forward, and these analyses are included in each of the issue area sections, 4.2 through 4.10. Then we had a comparison of the alternatives, the no project and the 4 other alternatives compared to the proposed project, and then compared also to each other. This is in section 5. The EIR recommended the environmentally superior alternative was alternative 1, no new well pads with reduced well count. We wanted to note that institution or implementation of this alternative would not eliminate Class 1 impacts, but it would reduce them somewhat. And all mitigation measures would still apply. And throughout all the issue areas, no impact classifications would be reduced. So Class 1, 2, or 3, none of those would be reduced with implementation of Alternative 1. So that's my overview of the project. If you have questions or future comments, you can contact me. I'm the planner. I have business cards on the back table too. And we wanted to move on now to the public comments. So if you haven't already, before you leave, if you do want to speak, could you fill out a speaker slip? And we have some here. We just need to get your name spelled correctly so that we can get you on our list. Like I said, you can fill this out. If you decide at the spur of the moment to say something, just fill out the slip before you leave and give it to us. That'll be fine. Oh.
All right. Thanks, Nancy. So I am going to call out a speaker's name and then a followed by so that you know you're coming up next and can get prepared. And we did have one. Oh, yeah. And please come up to the podium. We've got the microphone on here so everybody can hear you. And we are recording the hearing for future use. So we did have one request to go first, and that is Mr. Joe Armendariz, to be followed by Gene Orcutt.
Good evening. Thank you. I'm Joe Armendariz, representing Santa Barbara County Taxpayers Association. So I think that the EIR, which is a very sophisticated, complex document, and I want to recognize the staff's professionalism in putting it together. It does identify in the air quality section the low carbon footprint of oil produced out of the Cat Canyon area, and that it's lower than anywhere else in the state. I think that's very significant. So with respect to the document itself, it seems to me logical that we would expand the analysis to look at and pan out from Santa Barbara County, if you will, and maybe even look at the global oil market to figure out what type of carbon footprint does foreign oil produce. Many people in this room, I'm sure, know that we import 66% of our oil from foreign sources. 55% of that comes from the Middle East. Why not look at whether or not there are mitigation laws and requirements on foreign oil that mitigates those economic or these environmental impacts, and introduce that into the document so that the decision makers understand really what it is that they're looking at and what it is that they're expanding. I think it's also important to recognize that in California, we don't import any oil from inside the United States. We produce and use everything that we produce here, or except for that which we import via shipping from those foreign sources. This project, as I understand it, according to the EIR, would literally allow us to produce the oil, pipeline it, which is the safest form of transportation for oil, and refine it, and then put it in our gas tanks where 40 million gallons of gas every day are consumed in California. So it seems to me rather obvious that we need the oil. We ought to do it in the most environmentally conscientious way. And it seems to me this process is part of that entire exercise. And so in closing, I just want to do what I've done before, and that is recognize that the environmental community has done obviously a very effective job in bringing these issues to the discussion. And the staff and the companies in California are abiding by environmental regulations that are not being abided by, frankly, anywhere else in the world. And so we should all be celebrating that as environmentalists and as users and consumers and producers of oil. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Next up, we have Gene Orcutt, followed by John Wickenden.
Good evening. I'm Jeannie Orcutt, Executive Director of the Coastal Energy Alliance, where we educate the public on energy issues and advocate to policymakers to further the successful production, distribution, marketing, and consumption of local energy resources, focusing on coastal California. This project, as proposed, offers the best opportunity for us to obtain the energy we need in the most environmentally safe, sound, and responsible manner. Not only is no fresh water being used, and this project proposed to eliminate truck transportation, the oil will be produced under the most stringent environmental guidelines on the planet. While the alternative comparison concludes that alternative 1, which is a 20% reduction in well development, is the preferred alternative for specific impacts, in actuality, the proposed project clearly should be the preferred project with regard to environmental impacts. Let me explain. California currently uses up to 2 million barrels of oil each and every day. We import well over 1 million barrels of oil every day over the ocean into California from faraway places where the environmental regulations are not nearly as stringent. In conclusion, the no project alternative and its inevitable environmental impacts of continuing to import foreign oil instead of producing it here should all be considered in this analysis, and all proposed projects in California for that matter. Keeping it in the ground, while it may sound appealing from an environmental perspective, in fact, given we will still need these important energy resources for decades to come. The Coastal Energy Alliance respectfully requests this project to be primarily considered in light of the impacts it will reduce or eliminate by reducing imports into California. Thank you.
Next up, John Wickenden, to be followed by Layla Velasco.
My name is John Wickenden. I'm a 7th generation landowner and rancher. My family has been making a living in agriculture in Fox and Canyon for 181 years. I feel that the EIR should recognize the Class 4 beneficial impacts that the oil industry and the projects that like this have on agriculture. I can clarify that such over decades of corporation use of my land with the oil industry, the monetary benefits received from mineral and surface leases have saved my bacon more than once, especially during drought years. Without, I don't know that my family would have been able to retain our ranch and pass on this agricultural heritage to our children and to our grandchildren. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Layla Velasco, to be followed by Robert Hassebrock.
Good evening. My name is Lila Velasco. As we continue to review this EIR, I think it's important to point out a few facts. One is water use. Water consumption is important to our state. I appreciate how ERG will not be using any fresh water for production. Second, ERG is following the Land Use and Development Code set by the county. The proposed area is zoned for oil and gas extraction. Lastly, hydraulic fracturing will not be utilized during production. ERG has put much time into this EIR that proves to our county they will continue to be responsible producers. Thank you.
Robert Hasselbrock to be followed by Seth Steiner.
Good evening. Thank you, staff, for your time today in reviewing the project. After studying the EIR, I appreciate the work ERG has done to make this a responsible project for our county. I'd like to point out the ERG will be constructing a small pipeline to transport their production to the Phillips 66 refinery, which will eliminate the need for truck transportation. This will reduce ERG's carbon footprint. Pipelines are the most responsible form of transportation of oil and gas, and ERG is a responsible producer, and I can trust them to operate the pipeline in a safe, responsible manner. I ask you to consider the impact of the pipeline on the EIR. Thank you.
All right, Seth Steiner to be followed by Judy Birch.
Good evening. First, non-technical point. Santa Barbara County does not need any more oil drilled in our backyards. It's easily obtainable from other places. My graduate studies and degree are in air and water pollution, and consulting work was on environmental impact statements. I'm on the advisory committee of a nearby groundwater sustainability agency, but I'm not here to speak for that agency. You, the planners of the county, will be identified as responsible for this very important work. Please approach it with a healthy skepticism of all numbers and statements from the companies aiming to profit from this project. Data can easily be manipulated to tell a story by omission as well as by commission. I'll mention just one hazard. With many hundreds of wells drilled through an essential groundwater aquifer that serves over 100,000 people and our economy, there will inevitably be many breaches of well casings and oil spills. This could easily result in the contamination of this great water resource for decades. We all know in this time of drought how valuable sufficient and clean water is to us all, incalculably more valuable than any local oil. This contamination is made more likely by the highly seismic nature of the land and the fact that higher rates of earthquakes are triggered by higher volumes of oil-related activity and produced water injections. And the hydrogeologics of the aquifer area could well be affected by these activities, leading to catastrophically unintended migration patterns of toxic and carcinogenic liquids. Work hard and do the right thing by our county. We depend on you. Thanks.
Sure. You need some more time? No problem. All right, next up, we're going to have Janet Blevins, followed by Christine Bosch.
Good evening. Thank you very much, planners. I appreciate all of the hard work that you do, and I appreciate ERG trying to do the right thing as well. However, our water is what we need. We cannot risk drilling through the aquifers that have our clean water in them. I know that steel well casings are used. I know that cement is also used on the outside. I also know that leaks happen. And I know that water gets infected with carcinogens, if you will. And I listened to a farmer last Monday, same time, same place, talk about how a well that he had recently had, new well he had drilled on his property. He's also a 7th generation farmer in the area. So he's on the verge of the Petrorock project, on the border of it. And this test that he paid for his new well showed toluene and benzene in the water. We cannot afford these accidents. We just can't. Nobody plans for them to happen. That's why they're called accidents. But we know that pipes leak also. That's why we have so many plumbers running around, and they earn quite a good living, I believe. Thank you.
All right, Christine Bosch, followed by Annalise and Dule.
Thank you. I am very new to this, so I want to defer to the expert that just spoke, because one of my primary concerns is with the disruption of the aquifer. It's nice to talk about mitigating circumstances, but there's nothing you can do to really mitigate nature's aquifer. You can only damage it. You can't restore it. And I'm deeply concerned about that. The other thing, because I'm from Santa Barbara, and we've experienced a few oil catastrophes, is that we are now facing we taxpayers having to pay for the dismantling and disconnecting and damage done by our oil spills. So I then become very concerned when you talk about mitigating circumstances, who are going to be the responsible parties to make sure that taxpayers are not going to have to pay for what oil explorers and producers cause. So I really want to know where the buck stops, and it can't be with the taxpayer.
Thank you. Annalise, to be followed by Ken Huff.
Hello, I'm a Ventura County resident. I just drove up to the meeting here because there's going to be a steam flood project in the Oxnard Plain, and I'm interested in hearing about the EIR that's being required here in Santa Barbara County. Unfortunately, there won't be one in Ventura County. I was just made aware of the EIR on Sunday, and I find it very interesting, but there's a few omissions. And just to let you know, my background is in petroleum engineering. I am a licensed petroleum engineer, and I worked in the field both for government and private industry for over 40 years. And I've been involved in a lot of issues with subsidence. And that was what confronted me when I first came to California in 1979 in the Wilmington field, where the subsidence put the field below sea level, and it went down a total of 29 feet in the center of the subsidence bowl. And it was only reversed by massive water flood that repressured the zones. Subsidence is not just in places where you have depletion. California has a real problem with subsidence and steam floods, particularly on the west side of Kern County. That's in lots of big fields, Lost Hills, Simrick, Midway Sunset, particularly in South Belridge. And this is really because the diatomite is collapsing, causing problems with their casings, and there's very little they can do about it. The problem with the EIR that I see for the Cat Canyon field is that there's no mention of the oversight for or the investigation of possible subsidence with such a huge new steam flood. The geological and geologic hazard geology in part 4 of the EIR lists state and local responsibilities, and it omits the Dogger, who has responsibility for permitting all the wells, doing the projects, that is, approving the steam flood projects, and also have oversight of the surface facilities. But there's no mention of their contribution, only a mention of I think in the part of the state government that looks at seismic hazards, that's the Department of Geology or Division of Geology, and so also the city, or I should say, the county is mentioned as having some input in liquefaction and induced seismicity. On page 4.610, it says, it goes into issues of induced seismicity that came out of a 2014 report that was really aimed at fracture treatment and induced seismicity from fracture treatment, but is not really about what you get when you do a steam flood. Many steam flood operations use system called INSAR, which uses satellite imagery to look at the possible size or the effect of ground bulging and subsidence. And it also helps to map the heat that's being distributed in the steam flood. And I think they also use what's called a tilt meter, which will give a little indication of surface perturbations. Anyway, I think it really ought to be addressed better in the EIR. That is microseismic, and you will get this from a steam flood, and you will get certain earth movements. Either it rises or it falls. Just ask the people in Taft. They know all about that. I think that's about it. Oh, yeah, that's it.
Thank you. Ken Huff, to be followed by Larry Bishop.
Thank you. I'm Ken Huff with Santa Barbara County Action Network. And thanks for extending the public comment period on this and for holding these workshops so you can get some early input on the adequacy and completeness of this draft document. When this comes to the Planning Commission, there'll be a lot of testimony about the merits of the project. For commissioners and ultimately the supervisors to decide to approve or deny it, they need a solid full disclosure document. And I think this draft falls short for several reasons, at least these reasons, and I think I have 10 of them. Impact SGW, that's surface and groundwater, says that the proposed project, cyclic steam or steam flooding injected under pressure to enhance oil recovery in oil-bearing formations or injected of produced water and brine could adversely affect groundwater quality. The DEIR is deficient because it incorrectly finds that mitigation measures SGW3A through SGW5 would reduce the groundwater quality impacts to less than significant. In fact, this should be a Class 1 significant and unavoidable impact. And let me explain why I say that. First, mitigation measure SGW3A calls for pressure testing of well casings before injection begins. The draft document is deficient because it doesn't give any data about the well casing failure rate among well casings that have been pressure tested. I understand that pressure testing is routine, and yet failure rates run around 20%. The DEIR needs to have citations and real data on these failure risks so the public and the decision makers can make sound choices. There are 200,000 of us living in the Santa Maria Valley Groundwater Basin and 50,000 acres of farmland that rely on this clean water, not to mention the San Antonio Creek Basin. Second, mitigation measure SGW3B calls for monitoring of wells for pressure changes during steam injection pursuant to Dogger requirements. I understand this to also be routine, and yet failure rates run around 20%. Not all failures likely occur in an aquifer, and many do not probably even penetrate an aquifer, but ERG's wells all penetrate the aquifer currently, and many more, 200 and some more, will if they're approved. So the DEIR is deficient because it doesn't address what the failure rate is among well casings that are monitored during injection. Third, mitigation measure SGW4 calls for the applicant to submit an area-specific groundwater monitoring plan to the Regional Water Quality Control Board and to Dogger. The DEIR is deficient because it does not require this monitoring plan to be submitted to the county, where it could be reviewed by interested parties like us and approved by the county as part of the project approval. Instead, it relies on ministerial approvals by state agencies out of the public's eye. And fourth, mitigation measure SGW5 references the long history of drilling in Cat Canyon and the potential for inadequately abandoned wells to provide a conduit for steam injection fluids or production fluids. It requires the owner to conduct a records search and surface surveys or other methods to locate abandoned wells and verify the integrity of the seals. And if necessary, additional well abandonment is required to install cement seals in compliance with current Dogger regulations. And this document is deficient because it should recommend that the county require the old seals to be checked and fixed as needed as a prerequisite to consideration of the project. Otherwise, it looks like the only way to get bad seals fixed is approve more wells, at least in Cat Canyon. Operators ought to be required to test and repair existing equipment and abandoned wells before any consideration is given to expansion. I want to reference a letter that we submitted on September 23rd, 2015. Some of our comments have been addressed, I think, adequately. However, we asked for a map showing the project in relation to the aquifers in our area. There are some very detailed maps in the appendix to this document, but the draft EIR is deficient in that it does not include a map to make it easy for all to see the extent to which the oil wells and the wastewater injection wells will penetrate our aquifers. I haven't made a map yet of San Antonio Creek Basin, but this is a map prepared by SCS Tracer under contract with SPCAN, and it shows the Santa Maria Valley groundwater basin and the general location of the three current proposals, ERG being right here. I think that SCS Tracer, who prepared maps in this EIR, probably has I know they have the shape files that are in the EIR for the project and the locations of each and every well. And I know they have the shape file for the water basin because they did this for us. I think that, lacking that, the EIR is less than a full disclosure document. We need to be able to see clearly so the lay people and the decision makers can see what's the relationship between the wells and the basin. In our letter, we also asked that the EIR establish that ERG has enough reserves to cover the massive cost of a major groundwater basin cleanup and the associated losses and health-related claims should there be a worst-case accident. The draft EIR is inadequate because it contains nothing about their reserves or their insurance, and I imagine they have limited or no reserves because they've declared bankruptcy. If in spite of the pressure tests and the pressure monitoring during injections, a blowout occurs in one of our aquifers, as Christine Bosch asked, who picks up the tab? The DEIR is inadequate for not addressing this question. And finally, the DEIR is deficient because it doesn't include any information about significant discharges of petroleum products or wastewater into our aquifers. There have been many, and the Central Coast Regional Water Quality Control Board knows about them and has a difficult to comprehend database. but it says that there are 60 places where this has occurred. Not all oil wells, but refineries and storage tanks. One big discharge that was disclosed on their website was not hard to comprehend. This was 27 months ago. The Water Board posted a letter to GRECA demanding a response by June 2016 regarding a significant discharge of wastewater into the Santa Maria Valley groundwater basin from GRECA's Lloyd lease. For 2 years now, we've gotten no information about that. All we get is, quote, it's an ongoing case. This end of this week in closed session, U.S. versus the company formerly known as GRECA is on the Water Board's agenda. And the DEIR is deficient because it contains no information on this or other similar cases. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ken. Larry Bishop to be followed by Karen Harris.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to comment. I have five issues with the draft EIR that I'd like to bring up. Starting off, one with the risk of upset in Section 4.7, the off-site consequences and the conclusions to that is that they're not significant. They're not significant releases. However, you show a school being 1,900 feet from the nearest well. I don't know how close that is to the nearest pipeline that could release large quantities of gas, a vapor cloud, but you have vapor cloud consequences, serious consequences out to 2,200 feet. So I'm wondering what are the worst case scenarios in the risk of upset analysis in the QRA, and I'm assuming they're going to do a CalARP risk management plan when they're built out, or before they're built out. So I'm concerned that they're only showing us what we see. They're showing us a lot of graphs on consequence analysis and offsite consequence analysis, but I don't know what the figures are. We don't know what the quantities of gas are going to be stored on site at any one time. Their worst case scenario is supposed to assume that the total volume is released in a short period of time, and I don't see that being shown in the graphs that are presented. And so basically all we're seeing here are summaries, and I'm sure there's lots of more information that could be included, but it is saying that it seems to be saying that there's a lot of gas primarily on site, and there are populations, there are farm workers working nearby, and there's houses and a school nearby with somehow no apparent significant consequences. The wastewater injection well, I was particularly interested in that. This is an old well. It's been there for a while. I don't know what the condition of it is. There's really no description of the well in the that I could find. They do show, they indicate this on a map. I looked at the map. There's no identification. It's not identified on the map. And so I don't know what the reliability of that well, can it be rehabilitated? Is the aquifer that the quote non-beneficial aquifer that it is dumped into, can it handle the increased flow of wastewater from the doubling of this operation from previous days? And looking at beneficial, one specific issue with the relative release increase in of requirements for surface water runoff for industrial facilities. They have an ongoing beneficial reuse permit for contaminated soil, oily soil being used on groundwater wells, being used on oil field roads. And I don't see that. So I thought that should be also looked into and reevaluated based on current regulations. These beneficial reuse permits were issued, I believe, by the Regional Water Quality Control Board some time ago. And then finally, again, in following up with what Ken was saying, just the financial responsibility of the applicant seems to be a big issue. Especially, I understand it owes the county quite a lot of money, and they're not able to pay their county bills. For this facility, how are they going to be able to mitigate and recover from a major release? So just the financial capabilities, or they're just capabilities overall to do what they say they are going to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bishop. Karen Harris, followed by Jerry Salazar.
Thank you for the opportunity to address this important proposal with its huge impact on our greater community. As a homeowner and resident of Solvang for over 20 years, my concerns are rather simple and basic, and some of you heard about them last week. I drink water. I eat locally sourced food. I love a good glass of Santa Barbara County wine. I greatly fear that this process may, as well as leakage from the drilling process, may have a dangerous, unintended consequence on our water supply, affecting the health of many for generations to come. We have been living with a significant drought for about 7 years now, thereby causing farmers and ranchers, out of necessity, to sink deeper and deeper water wells. Can this company, and any other for that matter, seeking to expand drilling for gas and oil using this process, guarantee that it will not seep into the aquifers under Santa Barbara County? Another concern I have, and I'm not sure this got addressed, has to do with methane gas. We know, for example, that in 2015 there was this natural gas blowout in Porter Ranch, which caused the massive leaking of an estimated 100,000 metric tons of methane into the atmosphere, as well as negative health effects on local residents and the relocation of families from the area. Will this project face any type of consequence similar? The pipeline usage is not entirely reassuring, since we have witnessed recent oil spills along our beautiful coastline. We now have data from Oklahoma and other areas, as was previously mentioned, but Oklahoma, a relatively flat state where earthquake swarms are now occurring. Santa Barbara County sits on fault lines. Do we want to risk more earthquake? And I guess basically what I'm concerned about is the effect all of this is going to have on our agriculture, tourism, and other effects that it will have on our scenery and our geography and the people here. Thank you.
All right, Jerry Salazar to be followed by Joanna Barrera.
Takuani nikita fweni vici takuana shoma jo sana in espacio kundo nya yo. So I just want to say thank you for being here, and thank you for the Shomash people for letting us be part of the community here in Santa Maria. I just want to say that I'm very concerned about these oil wells, because I mean, I'm not gonna give numbers, because I mean I'm very new to about this oil well stuff, but I just want to say that there might be accidents, contamination of water, health issue, jobs, earthquakes, and it's very it's very unnecessary to open new oil wells if our fruits and vegetables are gonna be contaminated. So I'm concerned about all farm workers that if they can't have a job, I mean, they pretty much spend 6 months working hard to save for their food and rent during the year. So if they can't have jobs, then they're gonna have a hard time. So I don't support it. And if there's earthquakes, I mean, it would definitely will contaminate our water basin. So I just want to say that I don't support more oil wells. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Salazar. Up next, Joanna Barrera, to be followed by Noelle Lee McGivern.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Joanna Barrera. I am not only here as part of the community, but I also work with Causa, and we are a nonprofit organization here in Santa Maria. But mainly as like a resident, and like I've lived here in this area for my whole entire life. And so seeing this come up, actually, I remember when I was back in college, I was writing a paper about oil wells and like the dangers of maybe it's not hydraulic fracking, but it is injecting dangerous chemicals into our into the ground. And so I see there are a lot of risks, and seeing that happen in my community where I grew up, I don't support the establishment of these oil wells. And so not only that, yeah, speaking to that, there are farm workers, and our land is going to be contaminated. If, you know, I know maybe you've carried out your test of like the risks and the hazards. But what, you know, you can't foresee the future. And considering how our state has been going under natural disasters with the Thomas Fire, with the muds, you know, the drought that we're in, really, really consider, do we really want to bring another disaster to our community, to our land? I think we should really definitely weigh out the cons, the pros and the cons. And I think a lot of us have spoken to more of the cons of the establishment of these oil wells. And yeah, so I hear everyone out that's in here, and, you know, listening from like whoever, like people that have evidence of like, you know, the deficient monitored of the injection, the steam injections, and also the failure to really make this information as accessible to our community, right? Our farm workers aren't here because, you know, they're getting out of work late. You know, people from the community, we have the time to come to these meetings, but I'm here to speak on behalf of those that can't. Okay, so thank you.
Thank you. Noelle Lee McGivern, followed by Roy Reed.
Hello again. It's only me. I was here last week. It was a really wonderful thing. Okay, here's the thing. I went to high school at San Marcos High School. The senior class president works for ExxonMobil from class of 1978. I'm class of 1979. I was actually there at the oil spill in 1969. And we have talks, you know, because he's making a lot of money. And that's what he wants to do. And that's, you know, I'm not going to make anyone wrong. The thing is we have talks, since he does work. He used to work out on the platforms. Now he works internationally, because when you retire, that's just the beginning of making some money. We had brunch yesterday because it's our reunion. And like in the past, we've had all these nice, you know, loving interchanges of, well, they voted for fracking in our county. How could that be? And he's like, well, there's nothing left to frack. Don't worry, you know. So, wow, really? And then we're on Chumash land. We're on First Nation land, from the tip of South America up to the Arctic Circle. And the native people say it's time for the people with the privilege, the colonizer people, to really listen to them. And they want it to leave it in the ground. And there's a really good reason for that. And I think a lot of you have brought that reason forward tonight. And I'm really grateful that you can speak so well on that subject. My friend who works for ExxonMobil and has no worries where his water is going to come from, probably Lake Tahoe or anywhere on this planet he wants it to come from. He said, like I said, well, what about cleaning up oil spills in the ocean? You know, well, you're darned if you do, and you're darned if you do. If you let the oil float, it wrecks the environment. And if you put chemicals to sink it, it also wrecks the environment. We're killing the life. Humans can't live without bees. Humans can't live without whales. And also people coming in from Bakersfield to take these jobs, to build these dirty, water-threatening things, where we could have the love, we could have the, we love you so much. All these local people are working to put up solar and different sustainable things. Lots of jobs could be created there. And for instance, my time's over. I don't have any bacon to save, you know, and I have privilege and I can move somewhere with clean water like that. But I really love the Native people, and I really love the wisdom and the earth knowledge. And that's what I care about, and that's what I study, and I just want more life. And I have a granddaughter. She's going to want to drink water, clean water. I'm going to want her to be healthy. I'm borrowing this land for my granddaughter. And my ancestor was Light Horse Harry Lee. He stood on a hill with George Washington, and they were just like, nice place. And you could drink from any creek, any lake, any stream, any river in this whole place. So right now, it's not my time anymore. And thank you so much. I hope that we want to go 100% sustainable, and we'll have this big love fest, and we'll keep being human beings for more than 2 more generations. Thank you.
Thanks. Roy Reed, to be followed by Ed Hazard.
Hi, my name's Roy Reed. I feel a little deficient compared to some of the speakers up here. My family's only been in Santa Maria for 6 generations. We have to go to Santa Barbara, and then we've been here 9 generations. Nonetheless, I'm actually an owner and managing partner of the Tunnel Ranch, which is part of the West Canyon oil field, immediate neighbor of one of the APNs that's part of the ERG proposal. One of the things I do in addition to that, I'm also on the board of the National Association of Royalty Owners. I do a lot of work in terms of land use advocacy on behalf of different projects, a number of them oil projects. So I spend a great deal of time reviewing environmental impact reports, and my particular area of expertise is more in the biological studies, since I have a master's in plant pathology and a lot of underlying study in the area of botany. So I was very impressed with this EIR, particularly the biological aspect of it, for its thoroughness and its comprehensive nature. And I was extremely impressed with the great number and diversity of biological species, both plant and animal, they described in their very comprehensive assessment of that property. I was also gratified that that occurs in an area that's had oil production for the better part of a century, yet such a diverse population survives. Another thing I might cover, our ranch, 160 acres immediately adjacent to this, we use primarily for cattle grazing. We also have another 2,700 acres in the valley here, which is devoted to vegetable row crops. And just to, what do I say, give some reassurance to the people from the farm labor community, the quality of our water, the safety of our farm workers, and the purity of our crops is of paramount importance to us, as is the water quality on our Gary Ranch, which is immediately adjacent to this. And I think I can attest that our water wells have excellent quality. The cattle and calves on the ranch, because it's a cow and calf operation, are healthy. If they could smile, I imagine they would. But nonetheless, stewardship of the land is very important to us. One of the things that John Wickenden mentioned is that oil and gas production affords another unique benefit to this county. If you look at the use of agricultural land, most of it is in row crops or fast becoming a great monoculture. The fact that rural landowners in grazing land can collect alternative income, supplemental income from oil production allows a great many of them to leave the land in its more or less native state, thereby preserving native species, which is very important. Even in our case, despite the fact, I don't think it's despite the fact, I always enjoyed the thing. We have one of the salamander ponds that's cited in this environmental study, but in the absence of oil production, which we've had on our parcel since the early 60s, that land may have long ago, like back in the 70s, had that pond filled, been ripped and disked and planted in grapes. And I think you'll agree, there's nothing natural about a vineyard. So the salamanders and the pond they depend on would have long ago been history. So I would just like to caution the planners to look at the diverse wildlife there. I think the very effective mitigation measures and the negligible effects when you're evaluating ERG's application. I think I would feel great if you would move towards supporting that. Thank you.
Thank you. Elizabeth Schneider, to be followed by Lucas Meyer. Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Hazard first.
Thank you very much for allowing me to speak. My name is Ed Hazard. I'm president of the California chapter of the National Association of Royalty Owners. My family and I are Cat Canyon mineral and royalty owners. My background is largely agriculture, and I am on the board of the Santa Barbara County Farm Bureau, but I'm not speaking on their behalf. I'm speaking on behalf of my family and the National Association of Royalty Owners. Oil has been produced in this county for over 120 years, and agriculture and oil have worked together to feed, fuel, and employ the citizens of this county since that time. Agriculture and oil mix. They rely on each other. We are in no fear of the groundwater being contaminated. It's been going on. This oil production has done nothing but improve over the years as far as the safety, the quality of the controls, etc. The regulations, my goodness, when they first started producing oil in this county, there were no regulations. 1900, 1901, 1902, no regulation. I want to explain a little bit about royalty owners. It's estimated that there are over 600,000 private citizen royalty owners in this state alone, 8.5 to 12 million nationwide. The majority are senior citizens, and the majority of those are females. There are hundreds of private citizen royalty owners involved with this ERG project. They have a right to have their oil developed. My family are not associated with the ERG project, but I want to tip my hat to ERG. They're one of the best producers around, and I think this EIR is solid, and I compliment the county staff on it. There may be a few little things that need to be tweaked, but that'll get ironed out. As royalty owners and mineral owners, we are very concerned with how our oil is developed. Here in California, we have participated with the implementation, creation and implementation of SB4 and a number of other bills, pieces of legislation and regulations that have helped to protect our environment. And quite frankly, I want to thank those in the environmental movement for helping make some of that happen. But you can go too far. I am very proud that my family bears some of the burden willingly to help the global and local environment. Our minerals are worth less than if they were in Texas or Oklahoma or anywhere else just about. For your information, the United States is the only nation on earth that allows, there are small areas of Canada, very small areas, but the only nation on earth that allows the private citizens to own the mineral rights. The majority of oil production in this country comes from private property. The increase in oil production in this nation and gas production has been almost entirely on private property. Every barrel of oil that we produce right here in Cat Canyon Field or anywhere in California is being produced under the most strict environmental standards in the world. Every barrel of oil that we fail to produce, and oil production in California has been going down while consumption has been going up as we've been drastically increasing renewable. That oil has to be imported, has been mentioned before, mostly from the Middle East into this state. We're getting close to 70% of our oil being imported. Do you think they have strict environmental regulations? No. That oil comes here by tanker. All of it comes here by tanker, burning filthy bunker fuel, bunker oil. It risks spilling oil at sea, and it benefits regimes that don't like us. Would you rather do business with the private citizens of California or the not-so-benevolent dictators, monarchs, and despots of the Middle East, North Africa, South America, etc.? I ask you to take that all under consideration. And as was mentioned earlier, I do think you should look at the carbon footprint of producing the oil in Cat Canyon Field as opposed to importing it from the Middle East, because that's what's going to replace it if you don't allow this project to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Elizabeth Schneider to be followed by Lucas Meyer.
Good evening. My name is Beth Schneider, and I'm a Santa Maria resident. I applaud the experts who have spoken to the many deficiencies in the draft EIR. That's not my area of expertise by any means, and I don't claim to have any expertise in that area. I am a math major, and I do know that statistics can be manipulated to prove anything that anybody wants. I think some of the speakers before me have been manipulating the percentages that they have presented. Scientists are predicting bigger and longer lasting droughts in California. It seems very unwise to even be considering more oil drilling anywhere in the state, given the climate emergency created by using dirty fossil fuels for decades. I'm strongly opposed to any new or revitalized oil wells adjacent to Santa Maria because of the serious threat to our aquifer and air quality. Santa Barbara County should be focused on transitioning to clean, renewable energy, not approving new oil wells.
Thank you. Lucas Meyer to be followed by Espy.
Hello, my name is Lucas Meyer, and I'm representing myself for the most part, but I also consider myself to be representing everyone in my generation who will be facing the catastrophic results of climate change in the years to come. I would implore the city officials who are responsible for this decision to consider the story of Easter Island, in which when the European explorers arrived, they found all of the trees cut down and most of the remaining people pretty much decimated. There was almost no one there. And now we know that the reason for that is that they cut down all of the trees in order to make the mysterious Easter Island statues, because that was their status symbol. Even though they knew they were destroying all of the wildlife and all of their sources of food, they still did it because they prioritized something that shouldn't have been prioritized over their longevity and their security. And right now, experts are saying that we have 10, 15, maybe more, but very little time to turn things around. People say that we need a social mobilization that is equivalent to wartime, World War II America, in which the entire country, total war, everyone got on board. We need that. And it's obviously not happening. So to me, when I see this kind of project being in consideration, it's like when you look at the Rapa Nui tribe of Easter Island, you're like, what were they thinking? It's like, that's what people in the future will be thinking. Why were they building new oil wells when they knew exactly what the problem was and what was going to happen? So I really just encourage the people in charge to consider that historical example. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Espy, to be followed by Araceli Cruz.
Good evening, and thank you for your time. As a Santa Maria resident, I'm deeply concerned about this project and all the impacts that it might have on all of us here that live here. I know that in the whole state of California, Santa Maria, or Santa Barbara County, it's already the fourth on the list that gets more tons of pesticides. So that's what our children are breathing every day, especially those schools that are really close to our farm worker or agricultural land. I could well be wrong, but honestly, and maybe the only reason about all these projects is money. Money because somebody else wants to earn more, somebody else wants to make more money. But then my question is like, how many owners or partners of those companies live here in Santa Maria? Or how many are they planning to stay here for a long time? So when we're talking about, just somehow exploit our mother nature, and then just some of us have that privilege to just pack and relocate and be safe with our families and our children. But that's not the case of many families here in Santa Maria. So I will hope that if there's any other way to make money, that will be hopefully considered, and not take the risk to contaminate our water, our air, because we depend on our water. If we don't have water, then how are we going to grow our vegetables or fruits or grapevines? So that's my concern. I think we hopefully can protect our water, and not take that chance again. Then we don't want to be like looking back and say, how come we didn't do anything about it? So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Araceli Cruz, to be followed by Elena Simon.
Good afternoon. My name is Araceli Cruz, and I just introduced myself, and my Native American language is Mixteco. So I just wanted to briefly share with you about the Coda Access Pipeline, because I believe this has so much to do with pipeline fracking and the destruction of our Mother Earth. So just a reminder, we all know in 2016, there was a big social movement against the No DAPL pipeline. And I just wanted to share with you guys that I am a New York resident. I'm originally from Santa Maria. I'm here currently learning a lot of disturbing things that are occurring here in Santa Maria and Santa Barbara County. And one of them is the oil wells and the pipelines. And I think that if we approve this construction on indigenous land, this is abusing Mother Earth and her children. I definitely do not want to see another acquaintance or a friend out there almost losing her whole body. So I'm sure everyone heard about what happened in Standing Rock. I had a friend, she almost lost her arm. And I also had another friend who also almost lost her eye just because she was standing up and fighting for clean water. I think it's redundant, and I think that it's very disingenuous for capitalism and oil companies to drill Mother Earth and the water that we drink. And I don't think that everyone here realizes that if you guys approve this, it's going to affect the water that your children are drinking. And I think our children should be here as well. And I only see like maybe 2 children here. So I would definitely like to see more of our youth students, our elders. Also, now we are here, we are on the Chumash territory. And I believe that indigenous people and whoever's here should respect that and consider disapproving this construction, because it is, like I said before, like you're abusing Mother Earth and we're polluting our air and our water. And we don't want any more police violence against Native Americans and our sisters and brothers just because of, you know, like fighting for clean water and our health. And like myself, I grew up picking strawberries. It's hard work. And like my sister said, we basically are breathing pesticides 24/7 for those of us who work in the fields from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., breaking our backs and sweating. It's hard work, and I want to let everyone know to just consider about that and please disapprove this construction stuff.
Thank you. Elena Simon, followed by Katie Davis.
Hi, thank you, planning staff, for listening to all of our public comments. My name's Elena Simon. I am an organizer with Food and Water Watch, and I'm a resident of Santa Barbara County. So I just wanted to address a few of the costs that I did not see covered in the draft environmental impact report. So the first thing is the social cost of carbon. So climate impacts have enormous economic consequences, as we saw after the millions of dollars that the recent fires and mudslides cost Santa Barbara County. The social cost of carbon is the monetary cost estimated for each unit of carbon dioxide emitted into the atmosphere based on its climate change potential. Based on the draft EIR for ERG's project, this project alone would have a cost of $156,000 per day as a climate change price tag. And social costs of carbon are not the only costs that were not addressed in the draft EIR. I'm particularly concerned about ERG's financial status and the fact that they may be in bankruptcy and currently owe Santa Barbara County money. So if a major spill were to happen that the company could not recover from due to its financial status, who would pay for that? Would it be the county, or would it be the taxpayers of Santa Barbara County? As we saw with Veneco's recent oil spill, it cost about $120 million to decommission that platform, and Veneco had a bond for only about $20 million. So who's going to cover the cost of the extra $100 million? Finally, I wanted to, actually not quite finally, I also wanted to talk about the cost to water. So what would happen if our entire groundwater basin in the county became unusable or contaminated? What would the monetary cost of that be? So specifically, a few people have talked about what the draft environmental impact report does not cover, specifically well casting failure rates. As we know, these wells are going to be drilled right through the Santa Maria Valley groundwater basin, and the draft EIR does not talk about well casting failure rates. And further, it does not require an area-specific groundwater monitoring plan through the county, only through Dogger and the Regional Water Board. So it would be important that these 3 agencies would be communicating throughout the entire process and have a shared plan. They say that the next wars we're going to fight aren't going to be over oil, they're going to be over water. So we should not be risk contaminating our water. Finally, I do not think that the draft environmental impact report addresses the false decision between local oil and foreign oil, or the possibility to have a just transition to 100% real clean energy. And that's not just environmentalists saying that. The vice president of Sempra Energy has said that the transition is possible, the technology is there. So I would like to see a comparison between what all of the potential class 1 and class 2 impacts are for this project compared to that of renewable energy, which I did not see addressed in the draft EIR. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Simon. Katie Davis to be followed by Nathan Eady.
Katie Davis with the Sierra Club, and I really appreciate you guys extending the comment period to August 3rd. I know it's a huge document to get through, so really just want to express appreciation for that. I'll be brief. We'll be submitting more extensive written comments, as will the Environmental Defense Center on our behalf, but I just wanted to note a couple things right now. Firstly, as a couple of people pointed out, ERG is bankrupt. And let's be clear, this means that every moment they're operating now in the county puts us at financial risk, as there would be no way to recover costs in the event of a major spill, or even potentially to contain it. The EIR should address the environmental risks of an insolvent operator. Every one of the oil spills we've had to go and recover costs and via lawsuits, etc. Secondly, ERG's assets are for sale. The EIR should address the environmental risks of approving a project by an unknown operator, as we don't know who will pick up those assets. We could have Greca picking them up. Who knows? Also, their sales ad promoting the sale of their assets boasts 47,000 barrels of oil per day by 2027, which is nearly 5 times their current application in the same time period, and 1,500 additional development sites. There's a real problem with potential piecemealing projects and understanding the total potential environmental impact of a full build-out. The EIR should disclose total potential build-out of the site and cumulative impacts if the company itself is talking about that. The EIR should be specific about the maximum number of wells, including replacement wells that can be drilled, and the total environmental impact of all wells drilled. Each replacement well uses fresh water, causes noise, emits pollution, etc. So we can't evaluate the total impact if we don't know how many replacement wells will be permitted in total. Thank you.
Nathan Eady to be followed by David Wolf.
Thank you. Nathan Eady with SCS Engineers, agent for the applicant, ERG Operating Company. Just want to start off by thanking the county staff and consultant Aspen and the public for all of your prior input. For those of you that don't remember, I didn't participate. There was a notice of preparation hearing that sparked all this off, and a lot of that public comment guided the draft EIR that you're seeing today. When we set off to help ERG design this project, we set a goal to try and achieve a no impact project, or as close as you can get to it. And I'm proud of the fact that we got as closer to it than perhaps anybody before us, and we put a lot of effort into leveraging what's already existing there today in terms of a field that's already been developed and operated for over 100 years. And that gets to some of my bigger picture comments on the great EIR, and one is that the no project alternative for this project is pretty unique. This is not a situation where if this permit is denied that there is no project or no activity that occurs in Cat Canyon. This is a functioning oil field with fully functional facilities and a lot of vested permits. So if the project is not successfully completed, ERG will continue to operate the field to the best of their ability, as they have for since 2010. And that does have some accommodation for growth under their existing permit. What's very unique about this project is that if this project is approved, and I certainly hope it is, that some of these modern, fresh application of permit conditions and mitigation measures will actually apply retroactively to some of their existing equipment today. So it was one of the few instances in that the approval of a new project will actually go back and help some of these existing facilities operate cleaner and safer as they move forward in the future. And that's something for everybody to keep in mind. The other thing I'd like to compliment about the EIR is the alternatives that were looked at. I think they give a range of options that, should they all remain with the well counts and the activities that meet the objectives of the project in the EIR, that ERG stands firm that they will work hand in hand with county staff and decision makers as this goes forward to try and have a cooperative process where we keep working even after today to continue to bring these impacts down and have as close to a no new impact project as we can. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. David Wolf, followed by Rick Clark.
My name is David Wolf. I'm principal ecologist with Sage Institute, who prepared the biological assessment that's the basis for the biological resources section for the EIR. And I want to point out that the main thing is the biological assessment clearly articulates in great detail the habitat impacts throughout both the proposed project and then the preferred alternative. And what the EIR kind of fails to do, it sort of approaches it as a total impact on biological resources throughout, and it permeates the total amount of habitat impacts, what they're calling habitat impacts, when in fact more than half of that number is already developed and existing disturbed facilities. And it doesn't really approach that. It keeps talking about this big number, and then with the environmentally superior alternative, it says, well, then it will reduce that big number by so much. And it really needs to go the other direction. It needs to provide the information that's clearly detailed in the biological assessment that shows that it's small impacts widely scattered in predominantly already developed and disturbed areas. And in fact, the environmentally preferred alternative, environmentally superior alternative, 88% of what they're calling habitat impacts are in previously disturbed or already developed areas, with a small percentage of small impacts widely scattered around mostly existing well pads and facilities. So that's the main thing, is that, again, 88% of the preferred environmentally superior alternative are in previously disturbed and existing developed facilities, with a small area of impact widely scattered around also existing, because it is a no new well pad alternative, it's still around existing previously disturbed areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wolf. Rick Clark, followed by Harold Hill.
My name is Rick Clark. As a field superintendent for ERG, I'm responsible for all the daily operations. I've worked in the Cat Canyon oil field for almost 40 years now. And every day, my highest priority is the safety of all the personnel that work out there with this type of operation, and that they go home to their families every night. That's my main responsibility for this operation. I'm very proud of the fact that we run the cleanest and the safest operation in the region. And I'd be happy to provide the county staff with any further information on our programs, training, equipment, operating records for our company. And I'd like to make sure that the figures provided in the EIR are accurate with those further information. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Harold Hill, followed by Judy Birch.
Hello, my name is Harold Hill, and I want to compliment the staff on putting together a draft EIR that's very complex, and I know it's impossible to cover everything, and that's why you're holding this hearing right now. My background is that I am a retired civil engineer, and I have worked for an oil company that has done cyclical gas or cyclical steam injection, so I know some of the risks that are involved with that. And I've also had to work with cities that have had pollution, that have had their aquifers polluted, and have had to work hard and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars in some cases to abandon wells, drill new wells, seal off aquifers that are polluted, and so forth. My first concern really is protecting the groundwater and making sure that the way the oil field operations are conducted are actually safe. Many of the old wells that are going to be pressurized with steam could easily have erosion problems that would yield under the pressure that the steam provides. In many cases, those old casings have had windows cut in them to try to develop a different oil strata. Oftentimes there are no records for those windows, and that can be a place where the steam injection could cause the steam and pollution to escape to the potable groundwater. I think that's one of the important things that needs to be mentioned in the EIR. Many of those old wells could also have failures of seals due to earthquakes that have occurred since those old casings were put in place. And I don't see any thorough way in the EIR on how that's going to be investigated. So I think that needs to be covered as well. Much of what is in the draft EIR refers to regulations that are to be formulated by Dogger. I don't see those in the appendix. I think there should be a draft of the regulations that Dogger is proposing as a part of the draft EIR, so we'll have a better way of assessing how thorough the regulations as well as the inspections to follow would be conducted. I'm very concerned about the injection of wastewater into so-called unusable aquifers. I think that's something that needs to be analyzed very carefully. Maybe the aquifer isn't being utilized now, but if it's subject to the pressure of injection, there needs to be an investigation done to see if that will drive that particular aquifer into pollution of a potable aquifer. And that is definitely possible if it's over pressurized due to water that's being injected with harmful chemicals in it. So that needs to be a part of it. And finally, I'm really concerned about ERG being in bankruptcy. I think that we have a situation where their operations right now could be a definite liability to the county. I think that there needs to be consideration and a study done on what would happen at the so-called 20% failure rate for these kinds of operations, and a study to determine how large a bond that should be put up by ERG before allowing them to proceed on this project. It could be in the realm of $100 million or more. And so I think that needs to be considered and be a part of the study. I thank you for your time. And
thank you, sir. Judy Birch, followed by Morel Brooks.
Hi again from last week. I'm going to repeat some things because and I just pulled that out because I thought, I have to say the same thing for 3 different companies. It would really be nice if we could not have to do that 3 different times, but anyway, or even more. Anyway, I'll save that for last. One thing I wanted to respond to is the first gentleman that talked was talking about how when we produce oil in the U.S., it stays here. And not only is that not correct, but, and I am not the most up-to-date on things like that, but I do remember reading that, sometime in the future, the U.S. could have the biggest net taking oil from us to other countries. So I'm not sure about that, but I do know that it doesn't all stay here. As far as saying, we need the oil and this, it stays here, it's not. A lot of it goes away. The other thing is, my big concern is the water issue because it goes right through the aquifer. And as many people have stated, casings fail. and there was not a big history on casings that go right through aquifers. So in this case, it would. So I'm concerned about that. About the, it's spoken like, oh, the farmer said, oh, the oil companies have helped me stay being a farmer so many times they've bailed me out. Well, just to put things in perspective, only 1% of the county tax revenue comes from oil. They may be the largest single one that contributes to taxes, but all in all, it's only 1%. And as far as employment in oil, again, 1% of the whole labor force is in oil, so it's not like there's going to be tons of jobs in that. And I also want to echo the ERG owing $14 million already. They're insolvent, it seems, or close to it. And if they still owe money, how are they going to come up with money to clean up if something happens? Oh, and I have a question. We don't have millions of gallons of water to waste, forcing oil out of the ground. I think I heard earlier that you're saying that water isn't going to be used, but then I heard somebody else say when they do new wells, they're going to have to use fresh water. So I have a question about that. I guess I got to do some more reading. And bottom line is, why aren't we moving in the direction of green jobs and away from energy to get with the new world and the millennials that are going to inherit the earth? And think about longevity and security. If we have an oil spill here and it contaminates the water, we're in big trouble. I think I said everything, but oh, earthquakes, seismicity. BLM report said areas of southern Joaquin, Ventura, Santa Clara, and Santa Maria basins where active water disposal wells are concentrated at present have relatively high rates of seismicity, page 274, and attributed ML 3.5 earthquake to oil operations in the nearby Orchid Field, page 275. So, and somebody else also was saying that any earth, when you inject steam into the ground, the earth is going to move, and we don't know whether it's going to go up and down or sideways, and when, and we might not even know right when it does it. So that was my other concern.
Thank you, Ms. Birch. Merle Brooks, followed by Kathy Sharam.
Okay, good evening, staff. My name is Merle Brooks, and I'm speaking tonight on behalf of Citizens Planning Association. We have been speaking about many oil developments since our beginnings in 1960. We were ripe old 9 years old during the 1969 oil spill. And I have to say our membership grew 10 times within that year. So here we are, many years later. Our board does appreciate the opportunity to comment on the EIR for this ERG proposal. CPA requests that the air quality section be made more robust in terms of adequate numbers and appropriate placements of air monitors. I think Air Pollution Control District probably should reevaluate the location of sensitive receptors throughout the North County rural areas. Right now, you say air quality is a Class 2 impact, but I would argue if those sensors are not put into the correct areas and if they are not adequate numbers, perhaps it would be a Class 2. Perhaps if there were more of them and if they were located in strategic places, perhaps we would see a Class 1 impact. As I was reading the DEIR, I noticed, and I'm quoting this from Air Pollution Control District, it says, quote, its air quality management plan was written when it was anticipated there would be, and it's another quote, no growth in oil and gas production. If, in fact, the plan is written before that or in anticipation of what people have been mentioning tonight, clean energy products, I would suggest that we have to postpone some of this until Air Pollution Control District rewrites or updates its air quality management plan, because now we are still looking at oil and gas production in the county. CPA is also concerned about the amount of greenhouse gas emissions released in the different phases of the project. Our own county has experienced horrific fires and resultant debris flows this past winter. Greenhouse gas emissions possibly should be classified or reclassified as a Class 1 impact, because it's our own local area that has become susceptible to, the negative impacts of climate change. CPA recently sponsored a forum after the devastating debris flows down in Montecito. We had 300 people in the audience. The scientists were saying, well, what was once considered 100-year floods, these are happening now, maybe every year because of the intensity of the rainfall due to climate change. The incident in Montecito, the scientists said, that's actually something that would be considered a 1,000-year event between the fires and the amount of rains falling. I mean, this has been in the media, so it's not a surprise. As a matter of fact, they're saying this 1,000-year event could happen maybe next year or any time in the next 5 years until the regrowth is done. So again, I think some of this should be put into this EIR. I think that we agree about the observation made in the executive summary. There is no public benefit to this project that would outweigh the negative impacts to the environment and the health of the residents. Negative environmental impacts could cause serious health issues, and we're wondering if there are not studies that exist, even though it's not an environmental issue, but the health issue. Are there any health studies by our own county public health department where there has been some kind of correlation between, some of the environmental degradation and poor health? So we'd like to see some mention of that in the IR. Lastly, something that we noticed is many of the mitigations rely on emergency response plans to a catastrophic event, such as a rupture, an explosion, or a spill. I would argue that an emergency response plan is not a mitigation. We have mitigations to avoid emergencies. So I think where the EIR is relying on mitigations which include emergency responses, that maybe some more robust mitigations could be included instead. And thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Brooks. Kathy Sharam, followed by Gloria Soto.
Thank you for the opportunity to comment. My name is Kathy Sharam. I'm a resident of Santa Maria. I'm a retired wildlife biologist. I have many, many concerns about this project, including aesthetics, certainly risks to our groundwater basin, and the overarching message that approval of this project sends, that is, we as a county are choosing to continue to move in the direction of reliance on fossil fuels. I think that's just wrong. And with all due respect to the biologists that spoke earlier, I have some comments pertaining to the biological resources. And the first being that the construction and workforce schedule states drilling crews work in 2 12-hour shifts starting at noon and midnight. Yet I could find very little in the bio sections for wildlife that addressed the impacts of lighting and disturbance at night. There is mention of lights that would be directed or shielded from shining on adjacent parcels, but that really doesn't address impacts to wildlife or what the lighting does to our overall sky, our night sky. There are a number of studies that do show negative impacts of artificial lighting to wildlife species and to humans. To me, there seem to be inconsistencies between the description of the biological resources, especially California tiger salamander, and the ultimate determination that with mitigation measures, significant impacts are reduced. The report says it's critical to have more info on California tiger salamanders, uses of upland habitats. It says it's critical that it has that. It says some ponds haven't even been surveyed or were surveyed during the drought. It says one pond was destroyed because a well was reactivated. And additionally, I know that California tiger salamanders and both spadefoot toads, one of my favorites, both use burrows in the ground, but little attention is paid to protecting those burrows or protecting these animals on roadways post-construction. In fact, most mitigation measures deal just with the construction period. And I would argue that, these animals should be existing post-construction, and there should be measures put in place to protect them at all times. And while I can appreciate that activities occur on previously disturbed areas, to me that emphasizes that there shouldn't be any additional disturbance. In one section, 4.3, project construction, it says project construction and routine operations have the potential to impair movement, migration, or dispersal of resident and migratory fish and wildlife species. And then the impacts are downplayed, saying that mammals and birds in the currently developed operating areas adapted. But that often means that the species that couldn't adapt are no longer there. And also, I find it hard that a California tiger salamander that's migrating during breeding season in a rainy year has adapted to all the things that are going on in the roads and extra traffic and fragmentation, all those issues. I don't think those are addressed. And again, in response to the other biologists that spoke, sure, or maybe it wasn't the biologist, someone spoke about all the diversity that was there. And sure, that there is diversity and some species survive, but the species richness and the health of the population suffer. It doesn't mean there are massive amounts or massive numbers of California tiger salamander or, acres and acres of listed plants. And I also wanted to make a comment about something in the cultural section. I found it kind of surprising that in the mitigation measure 3A, if human remains are found, ground disturbing activities shall halt within 50 meters. I just thought, wow, you find a human remain and arbitrarily there's 50 meters. Maybe it's not an arbitrary number, but it seemed like if you found human remains, that might indicate that there was a village site or a burial site, and everything should halt. And I'm sure it would halt. But it also states that if the mitigation measures are taken, which means halting for a certain number of time, notifying certain people, that the significance level drops. And it just is incredible to me that you would continue a project anywhere where there were human remains found. Like, wouldn't that mean, okay, end of story? We shouldn't be drilling for oil here. Same way with if you're killing T&E species. I mean, if you have to mitigate for all of that, maybe it shouldn't be happening. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Gloria Soto, followed by Thomas Gibbon.
Thank you for listening to all of our comments. Again, my name is Gloria, and I am a Santa Maria resident. I have a niece, a nephew that Lucy is 4, my youngest nephew. He's 1, and I'm very concerned about what this could mean for our drinking water and for the well-being of them, of their quality of life, as well as the quality of life of many other residents here in the city of Santa Maria. Even if it's a minuscule spill, the consequences are grave, and they can be devastating. So I really want you all to keep that in mind and take that into consideration. Thank you.
And last but not least, Mr. Gibbons.
I'd actually like to say I've never done this before, but I've done this too much in my life. You know, I sit on the school board at Blockman, have for a long time. I live in Gary. I've lived in a state-designated oil field as long as there's been state-designated oil fields in California. Growing up out on the east side, there used to be a lot of homes up in Cat Canyon. Times have changed. Oil companies don't build homes, so everyone wonders why people don't live up there. It's a great place for an oil field. There's oil there. And I can tell you that when I got into the oil industry back in the late 60s, we reacted to a lot of things, and everyone wanted emergency response teams. And through a lot of years and a lot of training and a lot of work by a lot of people, an oil field is actually a safe place to work. And if I thought for a second there was air quality problems with an oil field, I'd say something, and I say it loud. I've done this for a long time, and I actually have an education to back up what I've done. So I'm going to say that if you look back in the field that's in question here, there was always way more oil wells than there is now. This is just a small number statistically. So I'm going to say there's things in this EIR that are overstated and some that are understated. I think that the Regional Water Quality Control Board a few years ago, when they got some Unocal settlement money, did a huge groundwater study, did some transects all through Cat Canyon, all through the petroleum oil field. This used to be an oil field here. Now somebody built houses on it. I don't think anybody's ever going to build a lot of homes out in Cat Canyon, but I'll be gone by the time they do if they flatten it out. So I'm going to tell you that I support this project, and I support the project because people keep driving on roads. We need that oil. You see the cost of oil going out of sight. Everybody wants to shut the oil industry down. I don't know where you're going to get all the heavy oil when you shut it down, but most of you live in town. You don't live out there. It's hard for you to relate to what's going on out there, but everything is in balance. And it's not bad air. I can stand on my front porch and I can hear people changing gears in their vehicles coming from town on the way out there and all the way back. So it's a nice place to live. Not heavily populated, but I'll turn in some written documents on what's overstated and what's understated, and it won't make any difference. This is still a draft document, and I'm not going to change the earth by what I report. So that's about all I have to say. And I spend a major portion of my life working on groundwater in this valley. I understand more about the groundwater in this valley than most. So read my comments when I send them in. It won't be worth paying for, but it'd be worth reading. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbons. Did we miss anyone? All right, well, thank you all for coming out. And if you would like to provide us with written comments, please note that the deadline to provide those comments is August 3rd. Thanks.